And now moving on to the next big one, Biopharma. Now, Gilead, that name again, is very well known household name for almost every one of us. Today, we have Joydeep Ganguly, who is going to be talking about Industry 4.0 in operations, how is it changing the course. So developing next-generation operations in biopharma, Gilead's approach to integrating Industry 4.0 into operations. So let me welcome Joydeep Ganguly, Senior VP Corporate Operations and Interim CIO of Gilead Sciences. Please give a big hand. Thank you.
Keep this very brief right now. I was really taken by the previous speaker's comments about, how the ushering in of the AI journey means we are going to be in a perpetual pilot phase, and I really like that comment because it's going to drive and anchor most of my presentation. But before I start off, I really appreciate your comment about Gilead being a household name. But for those folks that don't know much about Gilead, just to give a little bit of a history. We are a biotech company, one of the original biopharma companies out there. Our claim to fame primarily came in the HIV space. One of our CEO, John Martin, was extremely taken by the fact that the HIV disease was consuming so much of not just the Bay Area, but in general humanity. And we came up with what was affectionately called the first STR, the single tablet regimen, that served to actually render HIV more into a chronic condition as opposed to a death sentence for many folks. And then we followed that up with actually curing hepatitis C at a point in time where cure models weren't necessarily established from either a pricing perspective or a science perspective. So I'm incredibly proud to be part of a company that pursues things like patient convenience and curative therapies. And our current strategy right now in the company focuses on maintaining that laser-sharp focus on virology, but augmenting it with the similar leadership in oncology and inflammation as well. So we're an extraordinarily high science company. We believe innovation is not just what keeps our lifeblood there, but it's also a responsibility for everyone at Gilead. My talk today is going to focus on just one thesis. First of all, I always love coming to this conference because I leave a little bit smarter after hearing the speakers and meeting the people. But in general, the thesis of my presentation was, if you look at healthcare, it's an incredibly complex process, right? It takes about 6 years to build a manufacturing plant and qualify it. It takes batch processes are very long right now. They're very expensive. They're very cumbersome. The entire value chain from idea, concept, to actual implementation is quite wide. We are used to dealing with failure. We fail more often than we succeed. I forget the latest numbers right now, but if you're looking for instant gratification, biopharma is not the place to be, right? You will have one out of every X million drugs succeed. The joke is that our scientists, right, when they fail, they publish papers, right? Because we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. And the pursuit of understanding the knowledge and understanding disease states drives quite a bit of us. So why am I spending so much time on talking a little bit about this not being a instant gratification or a simple process is within biopharma, when people talk about AI, and they talk about AI in very revolutionary terms, it's going to change the world. It's going to press releases will abound that it'll cut costs by 70%. There's a bit of cynicism because in general, what happens in this industry is you tend to apply these very novel techniques on one point case study, but it doesn't have much of an effect on the end-to-end numbers. So if you take a look at the price or the cost of goods in terms of manufacturing, or the time it takes to build a facility, or the time it takes to qualify it, you could have 18 different AI use cases that within their own small vector space are adding incredible value to micro-optimize a part of the business process that is rate limiting, but whether it actually translates into value overall is debatable. And that was what was the thesis behind 2 years ago. We threw a challenge out to my team, which was, can we actually use some of the AI case studies to drive an end-to-end focus and actually, instead of applying AI or machine learning or large language models or neural networks or fuzzy logic, pick your advanced control toolbox of choice. instead of doing this in a point estimate way, could you actually construct a portfolio of lighthouse use cases that, when done in concert, actually dramatically improves either a cost position, a time position, or a quality position within the ecosystem? So it's one of the first times I'm actually presenting some of the real data from what has been a 2-year journey. And our lesson that if there's nothing you get from my talk, the one thing that I want to just impress upon whoever is interested in deploying a lot of this right now is, for a complex supply chain like biopharma, where you typically have 11 groups, 11 verticals, hundreds of suppliers, multiple unit operations, geographically distributed, applying a holistic end-to-end model with an end goal in sight is almost an imperative as we try and extol the virtues of things like AI. Because I heard the previous speakers talk about AI in terms of revolutionizing, and I completely believe in it. I don't believe anybody that's a bystander to the AI revolution is going to enjoy success in the future. But in biopharma, the ability for that to translate into real value, I'm not talking about the drug discovery part, I'm not talking about potential micro use cases within certain functional units, but for it to really impact the end-to-end chain, we've got to take an end-to-end view on how these technologies get deployed within the process. So to my talk, hopefully it'll just take 15 minutes. I've got some case studies that I want to talk a little bit about, but a lot of it actually is just focusing on the fact that how we approach this. For those folks that don't know Gilead, we're based out of Foster City. We have one of the largest campuses certainly one of the largest research-anchored campuses in the industry. It's approximately 3.2 million square feet. The joke is that it's the only campus larger than the Vatican City. It actually is, apparently. So we have 44 buildings, 70 plus acres, 3.2 million square feet. What we're proud about is that about 6 years ago, my team was able to actually change the way we thought about the entire operations. Typically, in biopharma, you have a very distributed fashion. You've got sites in Cambridge, sites in North Carolina, sites in California. We felt as though that by trying to bring a lot of these distributed functions into a consolidated campus, and then try and have the flow of the campus mirror the flow of the molecule, would have a competitive advantage. So where a lot of companies suffer from inertia or knowledge loss between technology transfer, be it from research to dev, dev to manufacturing, manufacturing to scale up to quality. We've constructed our campus where your discovery arc, your development arc, your manufacturing arc, and your commercial arc literally is an arc. And the ability of a person to picking up a batch record and walking to the next building is our technology transfer. It might seem incredibly contrarian because business continuity concerns will abound in terms of how much you're concentrated, but it's something that's defined sort of our thesis right now. And we've talked about structural flow, we've talked about partnerships, high utilization, and all that nice stuff. But the inspiration statement for what I'm going to present right now was, we said, okay, if we all subscribe to the fact that AI, and I use AI again as a surrogate for everything that's novel in the technology sphere, right? If there is incredible value, could we create a lighthouse portfolio of programs that would deploy them at scale, but most importantly, capture value at scale? Right? We don't want to say, hey, by deploying this, we now have 10% faster batch record release times or 5% faster engineering timelines. Because if that's not on the critical path for your overall cost equation or the cost calculus, all you've done is you've basically taken one part of your chain and made it very sophisticated only to be held at the mercy of the most unsophisticated part of your supply chain. And at the end of it, the patient, nor the system, nor the company benefit. And again, this might sound a little bit contrarian, given this is a very strong AI-focused conference, but on the healthcare space, the need for us to adopt this in a more holistic manner is what sort of drove this mission statement. So what we did was we basically said, and let's take this case study, and I'll net it out right now. And I've got 7 case studies that I'm presenting in the hope that it inspires folks in this room, or suppliers, or technologists, or evangelists in this space right now, to continue on where we saw value. We actually had over 40 that we prosecuted. Not everything worked. That's the best part of technology and AI, and we learned a lot from that. Some of the ones that did are the ones I'm presenting here. And again, it just gives a little bit of a flavor on what we as a biopharma industry have started to recognize as value through innovation. And the hope would be that some of these now, over time, become standards within the entire biopharma value chain, and then we're able to all extract value. So it's a great, there were some case studies here, and I've got a slide at the end that sort of pulls it all together. But some of the examples of the case studies we developed was automated machine learning-based workflows where you to reduce the sample sequencing by days right now. You can take a look at how many days it would earlier take to write down for the sample sequencing. We used machine learning, and then we basically used this entire sequencing operation right now and figured out a way to actually cut the time down. And again, the key over here was I should have said this, when we got the 40 use cases, what we didn't do was go and say, let's figure out a partner who has a cool tool that we can deploy today. And what we didn't do was say, let's figure out a use case based on somebody who has a generic need. We said it had to meet 3 criteria. 1, anything we deployed needed to have a problem statement that we could quantify as being problematic to the overall value chain. B, we became brutal about measuring ROI. We said, this is not going to be AI for the sake of AI so that we can publish something or I can have a nice presentation for TiEcon. It was about trying to ensure that the ROI was almost surgically computed, right? We needed an as case, and then whoever implemented it had to come back and take the value and then give it back, right? So it wasn't about keeping the values within the process and then passing it on to one part of the supply chain. So the second use case study was about research lab automation. Currently, for example, in manufacturing, and I don't know how many of you have seen biotech manufacturing plants, they're extremely, extremely large and extremely cumbersome. Some of the most advancements are in that space right now, but there are very few flex research lab automation stuff. So basically, we use robotics, we use end-to-end traceability, and the best part about this was we were able to produce and prosecute 12 times different kinds of data types across 1.2 million compounds, and it reduced the average cycle time on large molecule testing from over 200 days to almost 50, and less than 50 in fact. And again, there was internal innovation, agility, et cetera. So this flex lab became a huge component of our campus. The third one we looked at was closed loop control. A lot of the things right now in our research and manufacturing, they're open loop. And what does open loop mean? You do the processing right now, you take test samples, you figure it out, but there isn't a feedback loop that actually gets into a part where your process is self-healing or it's self-adaptive, right? You keep the loop open. And if anyone's on control systems, one of the most revolutionary aspects of controls was feedback loops, right? Where you were able to get the error function and then use the error function to triangulate it back and then adjust the inputs in such a way that your output was always in a safe vector space. And that pretty much is the basis of a lot of biopharma production, is ensuring that if your inputs are in one defined linear vector space, that your outputs are in the same vector space, and that defines what we call stability of the process. Having closed-loop automation allowed us not just to reduce the experimental design time from months to days. What it ended up doing was it ended up reducing the costs and improving the accuracy of some of our experimentation. So a lot of them, for example, are not classic AI use cases, but then they ended up trying to increase the, this is a great one, right, where we actually took the clinical data, used open source access data sets in a visualization engine, and then got the development timeline from 56 days to a few days, supported greater data types with more complexity, and supported greater volumes. And this is, again, it is not a fundamental game changer, but the notion that our labs did not have a data lake where you could actually incorporate multiple data sources right now, and then use whatever AI or whatever large language model that you want to be able to gain insights was incredibly important. And this is something that you would expect in day-to-day life, but some of the biopharma plants, we didn't have a lot of that. So a huge investment that we made right now. Case study 5, 6, and 7 are the most interesting ones in my aspect right now. Has anyone heard of an electronic batch record, by the way? It's a multi-billion-dollar idea, by the way, for those folks that are interested in electronic batch records. A batch record essentially is when you make a batch of product. You start off with the raw materials, you have your active pharmaceutical ingredient, you have drug product, you have your finished goods. There are approximately 4,000 to 5,000 steps in a good process that you have to go through. And the FDA tests them, we test them, we validate them, we submit them. And the expectation the FDA has is that every batch of product you make, be it for an antibody, be it for a ADC, be it for a small molecule like a pill or a capsule, you're making the batch as you promised you would in the original filing. The issue is the compliance burden is so high. I mean, how many of you today, I mean, I know this is an AI verse, I'd love to get some hands here. How many of you would take a drug today that says we just abandoned every quality standard and AI has made it? Very few. How many of you would administer a drug to your child? It's an AI-based drug. AI's made it, a robot's made it. There's been absolutely no human oversight, no human intervention, and no quality check. However, most of us are probably at this conference extolling the virtues of AI being superior than humans today. I am. I'm talking about increased accuracy, increased speed. But when it comes to healthcare, it's so emotional. It is so personal, right? We want that quality control person at the end. We want that scientist who will bless that the product is exactly as it means. Even in the base level, I have 2 young children who are constantly falling ill. And when I get a choice of an AI doctor or a real doctor, I'm taking my kid to the real doctor. I want to feel good. I want to be told the kids are going to be okay, right? And I know I don't want the AI tool telling me that the kid's going to be okay, right? And that's the weird part of this industry we are struggling with. And why am I trying to talk a little bit passionately about this? Batch records is one of the areas where we have, in our world, over-indexed in the compliance because our entire industry is based on the thesis of do no harm, right? That was basically a take from what the doctors do. And as a result of which, we have spent a lot of time over the last 40, 50 years building in extremely arduous and complex ways to ensure compliance. Now that is, in my opinion, one of the best use cases where either augmented intelligence or artificial intelligence or some form of machine learning can somehow not just ensure we can take the burden away, because the cost of compliance that gets passed on, you can actually get better and better. So this entire electronic batch record, and I've spent a lot of time talking about this, it does something for me which I think is worth every business case. It takes the time of some of our smartest researchers away from ensuring that the batches are made per a prescribed formula, allows them to spend more time on research and innovation and lesser on the compliance. So if anyone measures the cost of compliance, it's pretty high in biopharma. And it is because of exactly the reasons I said 5 minutes ago, because all of us want that. It's not that we have added that there. So like I said, this was a great case study. EBRs are getting a little bit popular in manufacturing. One of the things we did was said, let's try and apply them in labs, because what that does, if we are able to implement it, it creates more capacity for our researchers to focus on innovation. This is another sort of takeaway from this. So we were very heavily automated in manufacturing. Our manufacturing plants tend to be very sophisticated because we use automation for compliance. Our labs tend to be a lot more free-for-all almost, right? We've got a lot of beakers, a lot of things. Scientists hate to be controlled on anything. I mean, consistency and standards are not, I shouldn't say this, I hope I'm not offending any scientists here, but standards is a very, very ugly word for scientists. They believe it somehow stymies their creativity. But we've tried to get this to the point where we are trying to get more lab automation and real-time data capture, which again is the capacity build play. And I think I have one more use case. Digital twins is becoming very, very common. We're using digital twins for almost everything, be it engineering, facility design. It is the next wave of does anyone know? I mean, most people know digital twins in general. It is going to become, I guarantee you, in about 5 years, 3 years, we will have conferences dedicated to how digital twins are changing the way it's basically creating a virtual model of any form of a sub-process, and you're able to use virtual signals, virtual models of your process and predict attributes on the product or predict attributes of performance before it manifests itself on the real model. So imagine for a build, I'll give you this most benign example. In a building, if we have, in a laboratory, we have a centrifuge. and I have a digital twin model, I'm able to use surrogate parameters of runtime and pressure and how the agitators work, etc., and almost have a maintenance schedule preempted before things break in real life because I'm able to predict it with higher precision. Well, our scientists used it right now they developed a mathematical model to predict the optimal API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient particle size, where in the past you would have a ton of designed experiments that you would do in order to try and get the content uniformity solution. This basically allows us to use and get to a much better particle size, much better content uniformity decision right now, and save not just greater process accuracy, but they're able to actually be able to ensure higher product quality attributes. So, and here's my thing, right? I talked about, and these are 4 of the 8 KPIs we measured. I started my talk off by saying, Churchill had a wonderful statement, right? When somebody asked him about the merits of strategy, he had a statement he would make that no matter how beautiful the strategy, occasionally one should look at the results. And this was a bit our view of like, let's take a look and say, okay, you had 40 use cases, you ended up doing 12. Did we actually make an impact? And everything from the cost savings per KPI. Right now there's a cost basis for our entire research engine. The cost savings on a production rate perspective, the cycle time reductions, and most importantly, I'll keep this here because I also serve as the senior most executive on our sustainability and our environmental climate science leadership. I added the 4th one here that all these things, everything we did from a cycle time reduction, cost reduction, also had an extraordinary effect on our climate science ambitions. And I'll leave it here only because at this moment in time, there's a lot of discussion around how a focus on climate science leadership or energy leadership somehow is counter. It's almost counter to a company's mission. And in fact, in some cases, it's considered mission drift. Our belief at Gilead is that you cannot just do them. We can actually achieve not just leadership and process and therapeutic ambitions, but we can do so by also not abandoning our commitment towards our people and our planet. And that was an interesting graph for me to see that we had a 24% improvement in our energy performance. And that makes sense because if you have better experiments, lesser time to actually develop processes, you're able to actually use lesser energy. And this is a great example of, in our case, how you can show the world that doing well and doing good don't necessarily need to be mutually exclusive constructs. So my final slide right now is I gave you 7 use cases, and I talked a little bit about the promise of AI, the promise of all these wonderful technologies that now are at the sort of, the precipice of our work. What did we learn, right? And there were 4 major lessons I learned from this 2-year exercise, trying to build a portfolio of programs that, when done in concert, led to tangible value towards this calculus. Is, first of all, I actually think the revolution is actually real. I know we tend to talk about things in very cynical terms. I actually do believe in everything that we're hearing today in the conferences, that there are some practical use cases. As a consumer and a client, success and failure will depend upon how articulately we can establish a common burning platform. Otherwise, 5 years from now, we will be back here doing case studies and one-off case studies, and we would have done the entire revolution a terrible disservice. So having a common burning platform, stepping back and addressing where innovation has common purpose is extraordinarily important. Investing in the state-of-the-art technology is great, but as a company, we've got to enroll our partners a little bit more in our vision. We have a very transactional relationship with some of our suppliers, and everyone now has got I cannot meet a supplier or a partner that doesn't give me a brochure with AI approved stamped on it. And it's getting to the point where as a client, we're getting hopelessly overwhelmed, right? Because everything is AI approved, AI generated. If you don't do this, you will be left behind. Or, we will promise you 86% cost reductions. And I think having a little bit more of a different conversation with our partner network in terms of the problems we're trying to solve and how we deploy this is, I think, going to be a determining factor in how successful we are. The third lesson was, On this one, one of the things I kept telling my team as they were implementing this is focus on not just on the effort, but on the outcomes. This should be held to the same level of accountability as any of our CMC projects or our product launches. And the final thing, and I think you heard the previous speakers talk about it, with anything like this, you need to recognize that not all 4.0 case studies or advanced control case studies will succeed. The good news is not everything will succeed, but not everything will fail either, right? And I think being able to celebrate these noble failures, being able to learn from them, being able to share them, is a way I think we will collectively as a healthcare industry be able to not just advance the promise of this kind of technology and this kind of a toolbox, but eventually at the end of it, the party that wins the most in this is not producers like us, but in fact the patients. So with that, I will now end my talk, and I'm just very thankful for the time, very thankful for the attention, and very thankful for the invitation. So thank you again for inviting me, Neha. I really appreciate it. Yeah? Sure, yeah.
Pilots that you've done, how much are you engaging new entrepreneurs? And when I say new, I mean, outside of the company, or is all of this AI ML work being done from within the company?
We are the former. It's actually one where we've recognized very clearly that most of the innovation doesn't have to emanate within the four walls of Gilead, right? I think where we are contributing our know-how is in the process side. A great example right now is if I go in and we do a biologic process, and either you got like cell culture where cells grow over time with the right conditions of temperature, pressure, agitation media, and then we eventually test the product at various time points and we decide when to harvest. I'd go to a partner and say, how would you be able to preempt or preclude some of the testing and be able to give me faster ways? And they're like, you know what, if you give me the 30 best batches you've ever done, I can create a model that tells you, here's your vector space you should be in. And then your real batch can trend on top of that. And this is how we're engaging some of our partners. This is one where I think companies that go at it purely alone will find it rate limiting. So the answer to the question is we're not just engaging new entrepreneurs, it's also we're also engaging academia, right? Some of the ways some of the schools are teaching. I have a 11-year-old, and I think I grew up in India. I need the coding, right? I was very proud of my coding chops. I grew up on C, C++. I'm a Unix boy. I love it. I was proud of the way I wrote code. And I see my son right now who lives on GitHub almost, right? And his logic is, I'm not doing what you did. I'm not learning Python, right? I'm spending most of my time on the UX, right? I've got the back-end code. And have you heard of vibe coding? That's the newest thing they're doing. This is vibe coding, right? And I worry. I'm like, well, where's the value then, right? If you go to vibe code your way to a Python-based back-end, I am like, well, what's the next generation? Where's the differentiated edge? And I'm finding out, Anita, that the differentiated edge right now is in companies that are able to take this and convert it into tangible value faster than most. You and I were having a quiet conversation, and I told you 50% of the jobs might disappear. But then there'll be jobs that we have underinvested in today that will come to the forefront. And as tactical as it sounds, things like vendor management, partner management, will rise to the fore. Companies that are able to attract some of the best entrepreneurs to work on their use cases will rise. Long answer to a short question, but yeah, it's the former.
Thank you. Very encouraging for folks attending the conference.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again for your time and attention.